Alrighty.
A little bit of history.
I
Was a floppy disk, that would be history.
Yeah. I think we've got everybody here that's going to be here unless Al shows up late. So I'll call the meeting to order. This is the April 10th. Did I get the date right? April 10th meeting of the Norfolk Advisory Committee. Tonight our agenda is going to be fairly short. We have Jim Lehan coming in at 7:45 to discuss the budget. The budget is not final at this point. They're still talking. There's still a deficit showing. They're talking about KP more. Hi, Al. We just started 30 seconds ago.
Okay, all right.
So there's, we will not be able to vote the budget tonight, because obviously we have to vote a balanced budget, even if it changes, but this one isn't even balanced at this point. So we'll be able to discuss it some, but there's limits to how far we can go. And we have one additional article, and we have some minutes to approve. So we have 10 minutes before Jim gets here. I figure we can take care of the article that we waited for Angela to be here to vote on, but since she's not here, 2 strikes and she's out, then we're going to move ahead with that one. We have the 2 sets of minutes to review, and I figure we can get those done, and then Jim will be here. Lisa?
I have a procedural question. Are we allowed to vote via proxy? So if someone, another board member can attend?
To my knowledge,
Provide.
no, but
No, I
don't think so.
Okay.
not seen it
never
done.
happened.
Question.
I know, I'm like, thought about it. Because Angela honestly
Proxy or
wanted to be here, but she's in a meeting in Boston
Right.
to make her point on that particular article, so be it.
I would hate for the vote to be unanimous. They probably sent the wrong message, though.
Right, I'm not sure it'll be unanimous.
Okay.
Right.
There you go.
Fine.
Outstanding.
So, let us start with the minutes.
One more.
Get that little bit of housekeeping out of
There you go.
the way.
You're welcome.
You all got them. Did they get the second set?
Oh,
You got both sets today? So
does anyone else need
some of
them?
you may or may not have had a chance
Arlene.
to.
Yeah, I'll keep that.
All right, yeah, actually, we'll pass them around.
Okay.
Now that we know.
Everybody needs.
Yeah.
Pat, you need some new ones? There you go.
No, I've read them,
No, this is
made my comments on them.
Where's the warrant?
They have been, oh, so that's a new warrant. Oh,
That's fine.
okay.
I saw them on the attachment. So are we entertaining motions to approve the minutes at this time?
Does anybody have any comments about them? No?
I move to approve the 2 sets of minutes.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the meetings. What are the dates on the meetings?
Let's do the
April 3rd and March 27th and April 3rd. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
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 All opposed? It's unanimous, the minutes are approved. Since Jim's here early, let's put off Article whichever. What article number is it that we're voting tonight?
11, I think,
Article 11.
Yep.
yeah.
We can still keep you here for 3 hours, maybe 4.
Yeah, let's save Article 11 to end the night with. And Jim is here to discuss the budget with us, how things stand, what's happening, etc. So, what would you like to say? Want to pull up a chair and join us?
Microphone? I know.
We'll share.
Oh, there you go.
Anytime. Always willing to give up a microphone. Only give me trouble.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's raining out. What happened? What happened? It was supposed to be sunny. Gosh.
Such no.
Well, where shall we start? Should we, I guess we should probably get right into the KP thing. Okay.
Yeah, you've got the elementary school thing and the KP thing. which
Right.
are connected, yeah.
We've been working on the budget for some time, and we were down to a manageable deficit of in the neighborhood of about 200,000, which in the scope of the last 5 years is pretty easy compared to what we've been dealing with in past years. But the wild card for us was King Philip. We had not, as Pat knows, we've tried for a better part of a month and a half to get a meeting with King Philip, chair of the finance committees, chair of the board of selectmen from the 3 towns, as well as the school committee from KP and the superintendent. And not to the fault of KP, more to the fault of the towns. We just haven't been able to find the right date. So last week, Mr. Hathaway and I kind of took it upon ourselves to knock on the door over at KP and go sit down and find out what's going on. Because what we were trying to avoid was the process that we've gone through now for 5 or 6 years that makes it difficult to kind of really get a feeling of full understanding of where they are on their budget. So we went over and met with the superintendent, finance director, and one member of the school committee, probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe. And came out of that meeting, quite frankly, very disturbed. Although there's probably a better word, but concerned. That's a better word. We were concerned. King Philip has a significant problem. You've probably heard that they have said publicly that if they aren't funded at what I think they're saying is an 8% level, which for us is about a 14.2% level, they consider that level funding. 8% level, 8.9, I think actually, level funding, that they're going to have to make some draconian cuts. And those draconian cuts are inclusive of all extracurricular activities. That's all sports, athletics, band, you name it. Which, by the way, does have a price tag on the school side of the budget of about $800,000. That's the equivalent of about 19 teachers. That's true. That's not a figment of their imagination. Those numbers are valid. They have a $1.8 million, 1.7 and change million dollar problem. Honestly, I think a lot of this problem is self-inflicted. But the best analogy I can think of is that your house is burning. Debating how the fire started doesn't make a whole lot of sense till you get the fire out. And so we have to get the fire out. The cuts that they're proposing would be devastating to our school system. Absolutely devastating. There's a part, I think, and I've talked with the other 2 communities since you and I talked this morning, Pat, and a couple of members of the KP school committee as well. There are some that feel that they need to come to the cliff and they need to fall off in order to get their attention. I have gone through this is a personal comment. I have gone through their budget top to bottom now for over a week. And a lot of the problems are self-inflicted problems. They've kind of done this to themselves. But it doesn't matter at this point. They're at a critical juncture that if we fund them at what we have proposed, 6%, and you look at the equivalents for other towns at 6%, it's a $1.7 million gap. The cuts that they would have to make are draconian. Some people on the school committee have expressed a fear that they might even lose their accreditation. I don't view these as idle threats. I think I've gone through the numbers. I think they're real. So for the last 2 or 3 days, Board of Selectmen, Jack Hathaway, we've been trying to find a solution to this. So we have readjusted our budget. I have talked to the chairman of the Norfolk School Committee as well as the superintendent of the Norfolk School Committee, who has 2 children in the King Philip system, and was fully aware of the issues. She knew the problems they had. It was a good conversation. She's been terrific. Ingrid's been really great. So we have adjusted our budget to move our 6% up to 10%. That 10% will make a big difference to King Philip. It's about $800,000 difference when you bring in the 3 towns. Now, there's an issue of whether or not somebody will dance with us at the party. Plainville's reaction to this wasn't overwhelmingly favorable. They kind of choked on it because it's a big bullet for them. Rentham, take your best guess. I spoke with a Rentham school committee member tonight who was on the King Philip School Committee, and I won't mention the name, and I will tell you that he didn't even have a clue what the King Philip budget was, which just frankly astounds me. But statement of fact. So we're gonna raise the bar. we're proposing to, I've asked the elementary school system to consider lowering their budget from 4.3% to 3%. The school committee chairman understood, was favorable, but can't speak for his committee. And the superintendent fully understood and was favorable, but again, can't speak for the committee. Board of Selectmen did support it last night. The way we're going to get there is we have cut out the planner. We've cut out the police officer we wanted to bring in halfway through. We pared down the fire department budget by about $15,000. We've taken snow and ice back down to 135, which is still 10 grand more than it was last year. Mr. Garrity made a great concession on that last night. And we're going to propose to take about $150,000 out of the stabilization fund. Combine that with the 1.3%, which is about $130,000 from the schools, and we can get King Philip to 10%.
Excuse me, is this just a Band-Aid?
Well,
In other words, they've
it's
got
not
this
it's
far?
not a Band-Aid in the sense that it'll get them through this upcoming fiscal year. The issue is are we throwing money into a black hole?
Yes.
Very valid question.
Right.
And I can only speak from a personal opinion. I've gone through 15 years of King Philip budgets. So, and I'm a pretty good budget guy. And I've gone through that budget. I've got a meeting with the superintendent tomorrow at 2 o'clock. If we do this, and I've talked with some people I know at the other two towns, I think we can get a dance partner. Because everybody understands that this is just... I mean, it's just nothing good about this. I mean, it's bad for our kids. It's bad for our town. I mean, well, just forget the town. It's bad for the kids. I mean, this is a devastating cut. Devastating cut. And we can't let it happen. But your point, and we talked about this, is are we just throwing it into a black hole? There are things they can do, quite honestly. I'm going to speak quite openly about it. They gave the house away in the teacher's contract. They've got 4% increases just in their steps. Unheard of. Unheard of. They have 5 students on outplacement for special needs that are costing them $500,000. You could bring one teacher in and solve that problem. Their benefits, they haven't bid them in years. I mean, there's a lot of things that if they will be aggressive and rally to the cause, there are things they can do to get in there to fix some of this. Not going to be easy. It's going to be painful. But there are things they can do. And I'm been charged by my board to have that conversation with the superintendent tomorrow. So I'm going to have that conversation. Because we can't just throw this into a black hole. If we're here again next year and they don't do things to proactively, they've got, their budget is as big as the town of Norfolk. It's a $28 million budget. Now we're $30 million. You know, we're close enough for government work. It's a $28 million budget. So I just, morally, this is a personal view, I can't let the school system go down the cliff like this. I mean, it's just not fair to the kids. So we're going to bring a budget forward. We'd like to present the budget on May 7th. The reason for that, we know we're going to have a fall meeting and tweak it, because we're not going to know the state numbers. We're not going to know them by the end of June. So, you know, to postpone the meeting till the end of May doesn't make any difference. I mean, we will bring forward a balanced budget on May 7th that will show 10% for King Philip. I'm hopeful that the school committee will agree to the 3% for the Norfolk schools, which will sustain them. I mean, you know, it won't put back some of the things they wanted, but in my conversation with the superintendent today, and I don't mean to preempt the school committee, but she knows the issue. She understands it, so we'll let them kind of sort it through and work it through. But we'll bring forward a balanced budget with the governor's numbers, and we know that we'll have to have a fall town meeting to make adjustments. Now, if we don't get a partner in this, because it's a big jump, I can tell you the numbers. That might actually be of interest to you, because they're big. Glasses doesn't mean they're big. It means I can't read the numbers without them.
They didn't know a year ago that it would be this bad. I don't.
Last year,
Sounds like
here's
it happened
here's the
overnight.
major part of the problem. They have what's known as an excess and deficiency account. You've all heard them talk about this. That's like our free cash. Last year, they put between $750,000 and $800,000 into that budget of free cash.
How much?
And they put it into reoccurring costs,
800K.
700 to 800,000 of cash
Yep.
to sustain their budget. And they put it into reoccurring costs. They didn't put it into capital. They didn't put it into one-time expenses. They put it into reoccurring costs. So when the clock starts this year, they got an $800,000 deficit. Day one. Day one.
And the
Most
number that
philosophically,
we.
they're asking-
And
I was just saying, well, philosophically, we're doing the same thing, but.
we are,
That's
but
my
we
concern,
are,
point.
but we're spreading it over 3 towns. See, when they use their A&D, and they put it in as a budgeted component to their operational budget, we pay over the 800,000. When you spread it over 3 towns, we only pay our portion of whatever that increase is the following year. Now, you're right. We're perpetuating the problem to some degree.
Well, and I appreciate your point about the fire, but I'm trying to understand, how do we mitigate the risk of being in the same situation next year? Because the people who
We
put us in this situation,
we don't have any. I mean, only the school committee can take that, can make that. I mean, no one at this table, including me, has any authority over the King Philip School Committee.
what percentage of our stabilization fund does this draw down?
Very little. We put in 500,000 last year. We've got about close to 1.2 million. We're going to propose taking out 150,000. We've never had 1.2 million into our stabilization fund. We consciously made that deposit, as you remember, in the fall town meeting of $500,000, because that was one-time revenue. We don't want to spend one-time revenue. But the alternative is really ugly. Pat, I don't know if you have the papers, but I can share my copies with everybody. But these are the numbers. At 6%, the deficit is $1.2 million for what they say they need for a level services budget. At 10%, the deficit goes down substantially, 800,000 less. But it's a good chunk more money for us. We go from 394,000 to 657,000, which is why we need the schools to help us on this, because we can't.
And I support, I mean, just speaking for myself, I support putting the fire out. I do support what that is proposing in the short term. But you've used partnership in 2 contexts. Do we have a partner in the other towns who will then help share this cost?
I think so.
But, and other folks may have questions. I'm very eager to get to the point where we talk about the second aspect of partnership, which is us talking to the school committee. So it's like, how do we mitigate that risk, separate from putting out the fire, other than just having a nice conversation with people who perhaps didn't see this as a problem?
Frankly, I don't think it's a nice conversation. I think it's a hard conversation. I think we have to, and I'm going to start with the superintendent tomorrow. I will not support, just on one vote, but I will not support doing this again. And basically what we're saying is you've got a year to get your house in order. And they've got to make some very hard decisions. They have got to, their benefit package needs to be completely revamped. If it were me, now I'm from corporate America, so you got to, humor me on this, but if it were me, I would go to a zero-based budget on that school and start all over. And I would get someone from the outside to come in and rebuild that budget. Because all they're doing is perpetuating the same problem. They're building off of past sins. And the only way you fix that, you start over. You completely
Where are they in
start
their
over.
contract?
They're in negotiations.
So the contract's coming up at the end of
Following
this
year. My understanding is it's
Next
coming up
year.
next year. And so they've got to hold the line. Take the coffee and donuts out front of the house and do what you got to do, but they've got to hold the line. You can't sustain 4% increases on steps
And
for
they-
15
and they,
years. You
know,
can't sustain it.
They know,
You
anybody that
can't.
knows the budget knows you can't use, that kind of money for operating.
Can't
And it's,
do it.
to me, that's just total mismanagement.
I call it what you will. I don't-
But it was a Band-Aid last year. Everybody knew it was a Band-Aid last year. You asked if they knew it was coming. We knew last year that the $800,000 would not be available again. We've also heard over the years many times from the elementary schools that 3% roughly is what you need every year to
Yep.
maintain status quo. You take 3% of $30 million, that's $900,000 bucks. You add the $800,000 you don't have again, you're at your $1.7 million. And you said the numbers.
They're about a 4.2% increase if they didn't have that gap.
So sitting here a year ago, you could take 3% times 30 million, and you could add 800,000 to it, and you would know that you need $1.7 million.
You saw it coming.
To do status quo.
Exactly right.
So it
Yep.
should not be a surprise to anybody. But
It isn't, but there were steps they could take
Right.
to preempt some of this by making the appropriate adjustments within their own system that they have not done.
That's right.
Right.
And I think that's been a pattern, regrettably, over the years, that dealing with the finances is just not, doesn't seem to be anybody's particular responsibility,
Right.
except in a sort of putting together a budget, but not in terms of thinking about what you're going to do and to make things better.
Well, the impact on the communities.
Well, the impact, I mean, I can, here it is. You can all pass that around, but you can start at A and work your way down to Z. There are the cuts. And they're not the traditional, we're going to cut 2/3 of our teaching staff kind of nonsense we've heard in prior years. These are real. And the extracurricular programs alone, just on the school's side, it's an $800,000 bullet.
The pieces that you rattled off seem to me to add up to more than there was like two.
Well, there's a
60 or
list.
something there.
There's a list depending on where we were funded. They originally had us at 5%, so the list is a little bit more aggressive than our 6%.
Then you had like the 150, and then you had
Right.
another 100, and then you had another
Correct.
15 from somewhere. You were up pushing 300 grand.
Very quick.
Our piece here
Right.
was like 260 or 270 or
And
something.
when we met with them, I mean, you know, we didn't want to play this game about, you know, have you overfunded this and overfunded that, and we worked at that. And you can see they made those adjustments because they printed that while we were there. They took the $300,000 out of the health insurance and things of that nature that they thought they had for savings that were sort of there but not there, like we went through last year. We didn't want to play that game. I mean, if we don't, here's sort of the moral dilemma that I felt anyway. We're the first out of the gate. Our budget's the first budget. Plainville's the 1st of June. I think Rentham is shortly after that. And we waited till Monday because Jack Hathaway met with all the other town administrators and the superintendent on Monday to get a feel for kind of where everybody was in this. And they all left with blank faces. And the message really was that if we don't take the lead, no one else is going to. So if we vote a 6% budget, no one's going to raise the banner. No one.
Doesn't Plainville and Rentham have to come to the table with something, or would
Well,
they-
if one of the towns goes and plays, you know, dances with us,
then the
the other town's
Two
forced.
forces the
The other
third.
town's
Okay.
forced. Right.
Arlie, did you have a question? I'm interested what Arlie thinks.
I mean, band is not going to be cut under any scenario. I think that's all the usual alarmist crap. I think they're going to increase fees for
Right.
a variety of activities, and so the people who participate will find it more painful, but that program won't be cut. I just think that's.
She
this
has.
We all, I mean, to Pat's point earlier, this problem has long been coming, and the tone sounds a little bit more alarmist than it's been in the past. But to think that we should commit the same, that we should also use non-recurring money to fund recurring expenses in the face of what just seems like a fairly silly situation doesn't seem attractive to me. I think the budgets will come out in the fall. They'll find some more money for education in the state, and we'll do another Band-Aid on it going forward. But I just find the notion of them cutting band to be a.
Well, may I, Mr. Chairman? I mean, take band off the table for a second. I come from the same school you do, Arlie. I have heard the cry wolf many times, and I am inherently a skeptic when I see their budget. So I concur philosophically with you. This one's different to me. They have pushed this envelope too far, and they are at a point where they have an enormous gap, and it's real. Now, how they deal with it, this is what she has proposed. You and I both know that, once the budget's voted, they can do whatever they want anyway. So, it doesn't matter. But I can tell you that $800,000 does equal 19 teachers.
Are there fewer teachers there? And I'm sorry, I'm not up to speed.
Their enrollment's up, not down.
Sorry?
Their enrollment is up, not
And in
down.
terms of numbers of teachers this year versus last year, is it?
I don't know that.
Class sizes are bigger.
I don't know.
Class sizes are up over 30. They got labs
Right.
they can't use because they exceed OSHA capacity. They've really been doing a lot of that kind of stuff in the last 5 years, so.
So the systemic problem that needs to be solved is that more revenue needs to be raised either through an override on the school district level or the three towns coming together around it. I think that's the only, and that'll be such a painful and terrible exercise. The school committee may get up a little spine and do some more cutting, but they'll have to, that's the...
Well, I think it starts with their own budget, Arlie. I have really pored over that budget, and I really, really think that they need a fresh look at this. I mean, there are things they can do in that budget that aren't just small numbers. There's substantial changes that can be made to that operational budget that can get this thing back into control.
But I think, Jim, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, we went through a fairly painful strike a few years ago, and ultimately that strike was settled with with the numbers I think we're all complaining about now, generous increases down the road. And that was after a strike that I think the school committee must remember very painfully over there. That got to be fairly vicious.
Arlie, I sat on 2 negotiation teams at King Philip when I served on that board. They paraded in front of my house with signs. I understand, but you know what? Take them out coffee and donuts. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. You cannot. They can parade all day long. You cannot give in to unreasonable wage increases. I mean, the average corporate world took pay cuts in the last 5 years, not increases. You cannot sustain, in an environment where our revenue is dictated to a 2.5% increase every year, you cannot sustain 4% embedded increases for showing up for work another year. You can't. You can't sustain it.
Well, I think I appreciate the logic, and having been part of that world too, I appreciate the pain that others have gone through. But I mean, there was a painful strike, and that was not that was resolved when the superintendent changed, and I imagine people wanted to put things behind them, maybe, but it was there was some pain that they attempted to go through, in all fairness. But in any case, that's we may, as you say, the current situation is what it is. I certainly don't think that finding $150,000 of an admittedly remarkably robust stabilization fund is the right solution in a situation in which this problem is clearly just going to continue.
Well, we have 2 choices. Okay, I mean, and we can, it'll be a great debate, but we have 2 choices. We can stay at the 6%, because to go anything between 6 and 10 is a waste of time. Mm-hmm. So we can stay at the 6%. My guess is that neither town will increase beyond our equivalent number. I think it's a very safe bet to say. And King Philip will cut $1.7 million out of their operational budget. How they do it, this is what they have proposed. Now, whether it ends up that way or not, we'll find out in July.
Possibly by bidding their benefits package.
Too late. Can't do it now. Too late.
Next year.
Too late.
Well, let's get the bids out right now, then.
Can't. See, unfortunately, their contracts are embedded in their benefits are embedded in their contract. Ours are not.
June 30th, 2014 is.
That's their mistake.
That's
Now,
their-
the only thing we can negotiate now is what fiscal year 2014, or 15, actually, is going to look like. That's the point we're at now. 2014, in terms of their anticipated costs, are done. So we're hoping that we can now work with them to fix it for the following fiscal year, because there's not much, they're locked into where they are right now. Now, they can make cuts, but, those cuts are going to be in the operational components of their school. And this is, I say, what they're proposing. Whether they end up doing that or not, yeah, we could get 8 different opinions here at this table. 2, 4, 6, 8, we get 9 different opinions at this table.
Backing up to Arlie's perspective, so to follow what I think I understand the logic here, it's there's a certain management way of thinking or latitude over in the school board, and they probably got as conservative as they could back when there was strikes and pain. That's put us on this particular path. Us adopting 10% isn't going to really change that path. The only way to change this path is either they go through painful cuts or there's an override, which fundamentally changes the scenario either on the spending side or on the revenue side. So in other words, we could throw additional dollars at it from stabilization, but you're sort of sharing that those two things represent fundamental change.
Falling off the cliff.
Am I understanding?
Well, there's an argument for that. I mean,
Right.
there is an argument.
Fundamental change on the spending side.
There's an argument that says, let them go.
Our federal government's doing that right now.
Yep.
so.
But
Yep.
the only thing I would say to you is that remember who's impacted by that.
I understand that.
Okay, I mean, that serves well to those of us sitting at this table who are sort of have the financial responsibility for the town of Norfolk. And so we're forcing them into making some very difficult decisions that they seem to have not been able to make, and all of that makes sense economically.
In a
But
sense, they're
who
holding
pays
those-
the price for that?
So in a sense, the
Kids.
kids are the hostages
kids.
in this
Kids,
negotiation.
yeah, they're the hostage.
Well, and our
That's
property
great
values are very.
And
Quite
absolutely,
positive.
I mean,
Yeah, quite
if,
positive.
Quality of our schools too, so.
if King Philip
Everybody has a hand.
If King Philip becomes a less desirable school system, it reflects on all the communities in many respects, not to mention just the quality of education for the kids, but it does. It reflects on your home values. It reflects on how people view our community. We're a K through 12 system. We forget that sometimes. We are a K through 12 system. We're not just an elementary school. And they're just as important to us overall for the quality of education as our elementary system is. And so we are first out of the gate. So we have a choice. We can take a leadership role, and we can argue what that leadership role should be. But we're the ones that are going to set the course. It's in our hands, because if Plainville and Rentham follow us, so and they don't want to spend any more money than we do. So if we come in with 6%, they're going to follow right in line or lower. I mean, both their numbers currently are lower than our 6%. They're going to follow, hopefully, at least at our 6%, and the school system's going to cut 1.7. So that's our choice.
A key component of this seems to me the school committee, which has historically been reluctant, at least it appears to me, reluctant to tackle this issue, because this is the sort of the culmination of what's got to be 5+ years of a trend that keeps getting,
Longer.
It keeps getting worse. and
Longer
worse every
longer
year.
than 5 years, Pat. Yeah, it's been going on a long time.
The sort of structural change you're talking about to the budget is something that's been on the table for a long time, never seriously considered.
Right.
The possibility of a regional override has been raised at various times, never truly any effort put into that side of it either. So
We
it
don't
seems to
even
me that
think
a
the school system can
condition-
do a regional override.
Pardon me?
We don't even think the school system can do a regional override.
Why not?
I think each town would have to do the override and build it into their operational budget.
Haven't they done?
That would mean 2 out of 3.
No, they've never
is all
done-
you've
they've never done that.
Right?
Whenever we voted a King Philip White.
Right,
each
it's always
town
been a local
voted
override.
individually, And all 3 towns had to approve it, or it was dead.
Yeah,
Not
that-
2 out of
that-
3?
I
Not
thought
2 out of 3, all 3.
in prior years, there was a regional, but isn't it, I mean, as you say, the state budget hasn't been approved. There's going to be continuing movement through the next 4 months, I imagine. Further adjustments can be made in the fall. Why make 10% now versus 10% later?
Well, you really can't in a school. They have to, and this I do know from my own experience, the way the contracts work. They have specific deadlines in which they have to notify teachers for layoffs and all of those kinds of things. So if they're going to, by contract, if they're going to make the cuts that they're going to make, they have to make them at the front end. They have to do it now.
then
Now,
they can always
they
hire
can,
back,
they
right?
can hire back if the people are available, if they haven't got another job or whatever. I mean, yes, all those things are true, but they have to go in with that number day one. And so they're going to have to let the staff go, or whatever cuts they choose to make. They're going to have to make those cuts going into the new fiscal year.
And then they could be reversed.
Well, I mean, if they get more money, they can make a change midstream, but, you know, when's our fall town meeting? November?
Whenever, it's not a fall town meeting, remember?
Well, but
It's
usually
special.
usually it's November. It's a special meeting, you're right,
You
but
have it-
but usually it's November. And
We're in
so,
September.
it might even be December. So, you know, so you've lost half a year. And budgets in government, as you know, are all about cash flow. They're strictly cash flow. So,
Just to follow up on where I was starting to go before we got sidetracked, is it seems to me that we would need some kind of convincing that the school committee is interested in pursuing some of the changes that all of us, you know, I mean, I don't think we agree on the changes that need to be made, but we all are in agreement that whether it's the budget, whether it's more money, whatever it is, something
it's got
has
to
to be
change.
done.
I couldn't agree more.
And it has to be done within the next 12 months.
Yeah. Or they will fall off the cliff next year.
Yeah, and if they're going to fall off the cliff, then there's no point in giving them $150,000 or $300,000 more just to push it off a year. So I guess, you know, certainly nobody, or very few people are as supportive of King Philip as I have been, but it's time has come to address the problems. And if this is the trigger to do that, fine, but if it doesn't have that consequence, then I think we're just delaying the inevitable. So that would be my one big condition on this, is that we have some kind of serious
It's a
commitment from the
condition,
school committee.
we talked about this at length last night, Pat. It's a condition we can't enforce. All we can do is, and that's why I've got a meeting with the superintendent at 2:00 tomorrow, is just go in and say, you know, we're going to come to the table, assuming the town so approves it. We're going to recommend that the town come to the table. We think that you'll have a partner, but you've got some time to woo that partner. You know, that's the advantage to having our vote on May 7th. But, you know, the message from my perspective is understand we won't come to the table again unless you make the necessary changes that are long overdue in this school system. You know?
Has the selectmen considered, and again, I don't want to play chicken or politics or whatever with kids, but what if what if we go in with 6%?
Mhm.
Okay, the school committee, the management that we're talking about, is forced to then begin the cuts.
Yeah.
And the message is, if certain steps are taken to indicate seriousness and good faith on their part, then we would seriously consider, once those are in place, in November, putting some money back in, following their action instead
It
of...
won't work, because, I mean, you've got two other towns that have to be party to that, and not all other towns. I mean, you're really making it a difficult process. I'd say an unlikely outcome.
Okay. But I'm just
Yeah.
philosophically trying...
If we were the only, if we were the only player in the game,
Okay.
that would work. But when you've got two dance partners,
The other
it
option
just
would be
doesn't
to,
work.
instead of giving them go to 6 to 10, go to 6 to 8. And that forces them to make significant cuts, but at the same time, it's not
we
It's hard to argue
draconian.
significant cuts when you're already getting into class sizes approaching 30.
Yeah, we thought about
They're
that,
over.
and we did the analysis,
What
we
you're
looked
doing
at
is,
it.
by giving the 10%, aren't you giving them?
They want
basically-
14.
They want-
The number they want from us for level services is 14.2%. That's the number they want from us. That's their level services budget, which on
Be
their
another
on their
300.
side is an 8.1% increase. It just works out to 14.2 for us. And if we give them 10%, then it's a 4.8% increase. So they're still going to have to, they've still got some changes that they're going to have to
It
make.
appears to me, it's kind of a slap in the face when, you know, some of these things that I took some notes on, they're not even bidding some of these things. I mean, you know, you're naming some things in a few minutes of us discussing things. I'm sure if you lift up some rocks, there's going to be a lot of, or open some closets, there's probably, it's throughout. And I would, this kind of disturbs me as well, hearing all of this.
If the school committee would be inclined to give me a 5-4 vote to be able to do that budget, I'd give me a week.
I mean,
And that sounds, I don't mean that egotistically. I really don't. I apologize for that. But, I've been looking at school committee budgets for 15 years. Yes, there are things in there they can do, and they're not.
if you're a coach of
They're
a
not.
team, and you have a losing season, you're gone. If you're a president of a company, you're gone if these
Yeah.
things happen. The coach that was pushing those players on the court, the president of the college is gone. He's not, so, I mean, that's the real world.
That
now.
doesn't happen, does it?
It just doesn't. What's that?
That doesn't happen, does it? Coaches doing things like that on the court? I mean,
This is a pattern.
No,
It's not the first
Yeah.
time that some of these observations have been made,
Yeah.
and what have been perceived to be substantial cuts have been in the past made. And the class sizes, I think, reflect that. There is an annual cycle of pain
There is.
around this that
But we have two.
would have inspired more change than.
Yeah,
what
I
you
mean, we
reported.
have two choices. I mean, I see us only having two choices. We fund them at 6% and know that the others likely will follow suit, and we let the cards fall where they will. Or we take, at least from I'm speaking for me, a leadership role and do our very best to get them to understand that there are significant changes that need to be made in how they operate their school system. And reinforce that message. Tell our members, we have 3 members on that school committee. Reinforce that to our 3 members of the school committee. And say, we can't come, I'm speaking again for me, or actually I'm speaking to the board, because we talked about it last night. We're not going to come to the table like this anymore. This has got to stop.
But I think there are two things, right? You can take a leadership position, but the other aspect of the proposal that I understand you're contemplating is that you fund that leadership position by drawing down one-time funds.
Yes. We don't have another source. I mean, even if the school gives us back 1.3, we make the cuts that we're talking about making, we can't hit that number without taking $150,000 out of stabilization.
It's a one-time use of one-time funds.
Right.
that's
It
being
is a
proposed.
one-time use of one-time funds.
Right.
Nice way to look at it, Pat.
We
There's
think,
no,
we think.
there is no implication here that this would be repeated.
Yeah, we're not
Right.
drinking the Kool-Aid, are we?
Uh,
It looks like we're drinking the Kool-Aid.
You will not get my vote. Yeah, I'm-
Same discussion.
I'm just saying we're buying a $150,000 Band-Aid with this.
Well, we're buying close to a $400,000 Band-Aid.
Right. Because, I mean,
If it works.
the budget we
If it works.
had that was proposed to us a couple of weeks ago, we were starting to make some strides. We're starting
Yeah.
to make some improvements in the town.
We were.
And that's gone now because of this.
And it,
Town
and.
planner. I mean, town planner, I think,
And-
can
And-
save
and
money
Rick,
for a
look,
lot
I-
in our.
the most painful part of this whole process is the planner, to me. I mean, that,
A lot
you
of-
know,
a lot of little-
you know, you spoke to it eloquently the other night. I mean, that, not only do we lose the benefit of what the planner brings to the table, but we lose the revenue that that the planner would bring in. I mean,
Savings to-
it breaks my heart to take that off the table, but that's our choice. You know, we don't have any other place to go. We can't fire someone we've got because we don't have enough people as it is. So we have to eliminate what we don't have that we need.
Right.
And it's painful, yes, and I'm not happy
No,
about it,
you
believe me.
make a very good argument.
But the thought of this school going over the cliff and its impact to our students and the impact it has to our community is devastating to me.
I haven't been around long enough to understand the dynamics of overrides, but what I guess I'm trying to understand is, okay, let's say we have a school committee, believe that they're doing what they can, hoping year to year that maybe the overall picture would get better. Now they're at the cliff. Why aren't they going into override wartime gear here? Why aren't people making the case instead of just kind of quietly waiting to fall over the cliff? I don't.
Well, you'll have to ask them that question. I don't know.
I don't understand
If in
why
my
that's not.
position, I came to a selectman and a finance committee with that kind of a budget, I'd be out of a job. Gone. I'd be gone.
Me too.
And I should be.
Me too.
Right, absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
So it's like, where's, and
I wouldn't come to the selectmen with that kind of
No, you
budget, so
wouldn't.
let's put it
Turn in
another way.
resignation, walk away.
In my world, I would have been long gone. But I
We don't have
can't.
that, we don't have the authority to do anything about that.
No,
so.
and I can't speak for them. They're good people. I mean, they're volunteers just like we are. They're good people.
I'm not talking about the school committee, I'm talking
Yeah,
about
I know
others
what you-
that
yeah.
put the budget together.
I understand.
The other side of this coin is that we've been hearing for years about how the per-student number at King Philip is so much lower than the other regions, other regional high schools.
All the data's here. I mean, you know, believe me, she's
It's
given
really-
it all to me, and I don't dispute it, but,
Yeah, it's really difficult to
Yep.
to understand, on the one hand, the notion that King Philip is way underfunded compared to other regional high schools, and on the other hand, that there are all these budget items sitting there, low-hanging fruit, it sounds like, ready to be picked. So
well, that's
understanding
my
and
opinion. Let
reconciling-
me preface it by saying that that's my 1 week's,
Yeah.
review of a budget that I'm not dealing with every day of the week, and I'm not an educator, but I did inquire with people that are far more knowledgeable, frankly, about some of these things, and had some confirmation about some of these
I mean,
things.
I'm not
There's money to be had
attempting to
here.
dispute either side of that. It's just that we have those
Are you saying the
information
per
kicking
cap,
around.
the per student is low
Oh, yeah.
in?
Oh, it
King
is.
Philip?
It's at the bottom.
It's lower, it's at the bottom
And
for
are we
regional
using state
schools.
numbers, not their numbers,
number.
but
No,
state
state numbers.
numbers, so we're looking at
Yeah, we're
our
like
apples to apples?
$3,000, it's like 11,000 versus
Then
14,000.
then we should be looking for then an override is what we should be going for.
Well, it seems to me the problem needs to be tackled from both ends. But the issue is doing it, and that's just
But
been
it's
where
not
we've
our,
been
that's
for
not
5
our
years.
responsibility either. It's
But
it's
that's-
for the
No,
school.
it's not, but we
that's
have to
been the
live with it.
problem.
We have to live with it, Rick. I mean, it's still our school.
Yeah.
It's still our schools, and, you know, you've got, I mean, let's talk like it is. Rentham has never passed an override, ever, in their history.
Really? But
Can't-
the
For the
schools had
school, right?
overrides before.
They did.
that.
for the school.
An operating override.
They have never passed an operating
an
override.
operating
They've
override.
done capital, but they've never done an operating override, ever. So you tell me what the odds are.
Never?
Never. Am I wrong?
Let's
I
build
believe
our
I'm,
own
I
high
believe I'm
school.
correct.
That's an accurate statement.
I believe I'm correct, that they have.
What are you laughing about? That's,
And they go down in overwhelming flames. I mean, you know, it's not like by 5 votes. So I think I'm right, and I hope I'm not misquoting this, but I'm under the understanding they have never passed an operational override.
I think the only point I'm trying to get at is operationally, we need a way to tackle this problem, and operationally, there's never been a way to tackle this problem because we sit back and provide the funds. There's just, you know, we tried to get everybody together a year ago, roughly, 6-8 months ago, whenever that was.
We've been
to-
trying forever, Pat.
Right,
We-
I know.
we
So to
just-
get the 3 towns to cooperate, the 3 towns, I'm sure, have leverage with the school if we get together and actually do something. And that's,
I mean,
I think our whole issue is really operational more so than,
Rentham is the one that's getting the heavy hit this year. If we go to 10%, that's 657,000 for us. It's 825 for Rentham. And it's almost 500,000 for Plainville. So, I mean, it's a lot of money.
what's the
And-
difference between 6 and 10 for Plainville?
It's, for Plainville,
150, 200?
there's,
I may not have that.
I do. I just have to find the right sheet. There we go. For Plainville, it is it's 200,000. From 288 to 488.
Is there, in the corporate world, when finances get to a certain point, there's mechanisms you could use to sort of kick in, to sort of get fresh, bankruptcy reorganization and such.
Oops, why do I keep
Is there
doing
anything
that?
that can be done in the public sector that would curtail budget authority in the favor of some appointed budget magistrate or something?
Receivership.
You sort of see what
They go
I don't wanna call
bankrupt.
it,
Well, the state comes into a town. I mean, we've had municipalities in Massachusetts go bankrupt, and the state has basically put them in receivership. We have, yeah.
but I'm saying for this
One actually
particular
that's pretty close to
component,
us.
That's something which is
Yeah.
operational in nature. That's why,
Yeah.
is there any equivalent in this type of a situation?
They're not going to go into receivership. They're just going to make the cuts. I mean, state law doesn't allow you to deficit spend. And so they'll spend what they have. It's just what the impact of that spending is.
Well, they'll spend what we have.
I mean,
That's the problem.
you all make very valid arguments. I mean, this is tearing me apart because I was, this was the first budget year in my time on the selectmen that I thought maybe we could start our way back, and it kind of put, wow, gee, I can start to do some of the things I tried to do 8 years ago, and here we are, and the irony is we tried to head it off. We tried to head it off, and we're unsuccessful. So it's option, door one or door two, and I lean to the side of the kids. And I don't mean to make this emotional, but I lean to the side of the kids here and say that if I'm going to gamble, I want to gamble in favor of the kids.
But sorry, shouldn't interrupt.
Well, it sounds trite, but I don't mean it to be trite. Maybe it's selfish. I got 6 grandkids in the system. So be it.
I think there's no question about the value and the support that Norfolk has traditionally given to KP.
Yeah.
Whether or not by giving them the money in this fashion or the support in this fashion, we've blinded them to the realities of their life is maybe the issue. But the fact that we are proposing not only to give them the 8%, but to take the $150,000 of money that is not going to be there next year. And I think was part, perhaps in the back of some people's mind, might have been in the back of maybe a capital, maybe some road work, stuff like that, that might have been part of an improvement program for the town. Those are, that is where I find the proposal that I understand is at work to have a shortcoming. I think if you said, well, we're going to lose a policeman, we're going to lose the accreditation in the library by cutting back the hours there, if we're going to do any one of those painful things, that would have, I think, put the town on the same footing from that we want the school to be on. That would say we're prepared to step up and cut our budget in order to meet this. That's a priority. That's what we want you guys to do. Look at the sacrifice we've made. I think that brings a certain strong arm to the table. So it's not a vote against KP so much as it is the funding mechanism that I gather is being contemplated.
Well, we don't have any alternative, Harley. I mean, you can always get into the argument that you put the money aside to use it for circumstances like this. I'm not concerned about our bond ratings. We're well below our debt ceiling. We're not over-leveraged. Our debt-to-revenue ratio is very good. S&P is coming in. I'm comfortable. This is a business I know well. We're going to be okay. In fact, I'm kind of hopeful we might even get a bump up. We're okay. $150,000 will not impact us. Now, that said, that $150,000 could be spent other ways. I mean, our roads are in desperate need. I mean, the list is long. I mean, we have an enormous amount of capital obligations that have been not funded for many years. It's money we need, and it's money, I mean, I thought we were going to get the $288,000. I mean, when we got to the end of November, I said, wow, I think we're actually going to get this money, and then first week in December, bang, it's gone. And I was thrilled to write that check because we've waited so long to write it. I came on the Board of Selectmen selfishly to try and get more things done, and my whole term has been just trying to retain what we've got. I was kind of looking forward to a year or two where we could start to rebuild and so on. But this is the deal. This is the hand we're dealt, and we didn't create it. We've been dealt it, and we're at the front of this. We're going to set the course. It is in our hands, I believe, because I don't think one of the other two towns, whatever we set, and it's just our destiny because we're the first town meeting. That's the way it goes. I mean, whatever we set, and even if we delay it, it's not going to matter. Plainville doesn't have their meeting until the beginning of June, and Rentham's after that. So we're going to set the table. So we have to make a decision.
I guess what I can hear in everyone's comments here is, what's going to be the first day of change? When is the first day of change for all of this?
Well, what we're going to suggest is that we invite the King Philip, the whole school committee, as far as I'm concerned, and the superintendent to come into the next selectmen's meeting, which is 2 weeks from yesterday. And you guys post, we'll find a bigger room. We'll go to the library, whatever it takes, and have this discussion. If we need to go, whatever we decide, we need to go to town meeting unified. Because Arlie, you've been around a long time, you've seen it, and I've seen it. I've seen those floor fights where people want to start moving money around. I say, I make a motion to take $200,000 out of the police and fire and put it over in the King Philip. You may remember the one where somebody wanted to put 7% into the Norfolk school systems and wanted to take the money. Those things happen. And you get an emotional group of people in because they think the band program's going to go, or the football program's going to go, or what have you, and crazy votes happen. So we need to, whatever we do, we don't want that scenario on May 7th, I don't think. So we need to come to town meeting unified in terms of whatever decision we collectively make and present that to the community, and hopefully they'll support us in that presentation, because you get people that don't know the budget, that just react emotionally, which is understandable. I mean, there's no more emotional issue than your kids. That you're going to get some crazy decisions that could seriously impact our ability to operate the town. So
You've, us going first, us setting sort of the tone, an example, the bar, you've said that several times. This might not be an appropriate question, but the bulk of how we're making this work is by dipping into the reserves, correct?
No. It's a series of items. We're cutting about $75,000 out of the operating budget. The schools, if they agree to go down to 3%, would contribute another $130,000. We would then add $150,000 out of the stabilization fund. So the combining of those three areas would get us to the 10%.
The way we're doing it, I would wonder if the other towns are also looking at that. I mean, do they even have stabilization funds to then dip into?
Rentham has over $1 million of free cash.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Do we know if the elementary schools go down to 3%? Was that or for that 130? What are they going to need to cut?
I talked with the superintendent today about that, and as I said, she has 2 kids in King Philip, so she's well aware of the issue, and she views it, by the way, as critically as I think I do. I hope I'm not preempting too much, but she kind of anticipated it. And there's conversation to be had, so I'm ahead of the conversation, so to speak. So it's really a school committee decision. But her words to me was that the 4.3 put some things back. I mean, I was here for the presentation too, as you know, that good things. I fully support the 4.3 budget. It's a very realistic, good budget. She felt that they could do okay if they were down to 3%. Now, she can articulate far better than me what exactly that means, but it was nice to hear her as supportive of the issue as she was. But again, that's in the hands of the school committee. They may not agree. They may want to. They've given it the well for a couple of years too, so they may feel that it's their time, and I understand that. But to make this work, it has to be a triad, because we can't dip in $300,000 into our stabilization fund. I would not favor that.
When do you expect to vote on a budget? I'm sorry, you probably said a date earlier. I missed it.
Jim's mention of the meeting 2 weeks from now. We're not planning on meeting next week. By
it's the 23rd or 4th?
24th.
We meet on a Wednesday because Candidates Night is Tuesday.
We are. As a matter of fact, just today we scheduled that as a joint meeting of us and the selectmen.
Right.
Oh, April 24th?
The only item we will have left will be the budget.
Right, and we were going to invite the King Philip crowd of however many they choose to bring.
So that's a joint meeting, and at some point, if the budget is settled, we will depart, or else we'll ask for a minute of time or something to vote the budget.
I mean, basically, we're going to be at 2 budgets. We're going to be at a budget with King Philip at 6, and we're going to be at a budget with King Philip at 10.
The 24th.
Maybe the usual 7:30 time, or?
Your meeting starts at 7?
7. Our meeting starts at 7.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do some, if you want to.
Yeah, they have other.
Why don't we schedule you guys why don't we schedule this for 7:30, which you're used to, and we have other business that we can conduct?
Sure.
For that evening?
All right, so our meeting.
7:30.
7 o'clock if you want to see the selectmen in action, 7:30 we will be officially convened.
Don't come early.
The action is not what it's cranked up.
Not at all. I mean, the cast of characters is not worth the admission, believe me. It's been so much fun.
The unfortunate thing about this is that anybody that's paid attention has known it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, the handwriting's been on the wall.
And it's just been no way to get it's like you say, we have no direct and immediate responsibility. We can only work from afar.
That's right.
And somehow we've got to find a way to change that if this is going to work.
Well, I think that meeting on Wednesday, I mean, if we do take this leadership role, if you all concur, and you know, we feel strongly about it at this point, and I admit there are good counter arguments, no disagreement there. You know, it really needs to start next Wednesday or 2 weeks from today, as a strong message sent that we're giving you a life support to fix a problem. And if you don't fix it, that life support won't be there the following year.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't have any objection to the one-time money thing, just because I view the school as our biggest capital asset.
Mm-hmm. 2/3 of our budget.
If it needs a new tire, then dip into capital to buy a new tire. I don't, you know, in principle, I don't have a problem there. I just, as I say, my concern is strictly, what are we, like Al says, you know, when does change start? This, you know, this is a consequence of years of hoping the problem will go away.
This is the first time that I've actually felt that the cuts would have to actually occur.
I know, you've been a skeptic all along.
I know. I've been a hard sell on this budget, because I know their budgets pretty well, and I've been a hard sell on it, and proven right over the years, because the cuts haven't happened. This one got my attention, unfortunately.
I mean, we don't have anything to vote on tonight. This was just purely to bring us up to speed with what's going on. My goodness, an audience. We never have an audience.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing all this, appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
Yeah, oh, hey, thanks a lot, man. If you think I want to not share this, you're crazy.
And by the way, thank you for extending yourself and going ahead and really doing the due diligence that possibly these other towns aren't doing, and being able to present to us a case that's, you know, a little bit, you know, so we have a better understanding of this.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you. I don't know what else I could add to it.
Well, the point, you know,
Right.
let's say we were
Yeah, I think we're good.
here to be brought up to date, and I
Yeah.
think we've
We are.
accomplished that. And let's say no action tonight. We'll have our meeting 2 weeks from now.
Pat, I don't know if you have all of this data, but if you don't, I'll get it to you and you can share it with your committee. Some of it's pretty good, some of it, you know, I'm not a big believer in per pupil expenditures, you know, enrollments go up, enrollments go down, things skew those numbers. So you know, they're one consideration to take a look at, and
Yeah.
when you take a look at those in terms of King Philip and Norfolk and Rentham and the elementary systems, you'll see that King Philip is below all of them. But those numbers can be skewed. I mean, Norfolk's elementary school has gone down by 40 students. Obviously, the number per capita goes up, you know, so it distorts the figures somewhat unjustifiably. Depending on which superintendent you talk to, they both believe their number should be larger, so you guys will have to help me figure that one out. But do you agree that we should bring him in, invite him for
Oh, sure.
for the meeting?
Yeah.
I think so.
We have to hear from them every year anyway, so as good a time as any. Sooner the better.
I think they were trying to avoid us this year.
Sorry, just who were you?
King Philip,
King Philip.
The school committee.
yeah. Well, whoever they want to bring, we just
It's
invite them.
Usually the chairman of the school committee, the superintendent, and.
And the
also
finance,
usually there's
Paul
three of
Schaefer.
them, Yeah.
Paul was in the meeting that we had that day. It wasn't a good meeting. Well, it was a good meeting, I don't mean it that way, but the message was not good.
Has there been any,
Okay.
has there been any other line item in the Norfolk town budget that has grown as rapidly as KP over the last 5 years?
No.
But that's not unique to
No.
Norfolk. or-
No,
that's-
it's not unique to Norfolk, but schools tend to grow at a higher level than most other. The only operating budget that frankly has grown a little bit above the norm, it would be the fire budget, and that's basically because of the implementation of ALS and the staffing requirements and the callback requirements, which we anticipated and expected. And next year should level. Next year will be the year where I think it'll start to level off.
That's also a revenue generator, too,
It
though,
it
right?
is, although it's gone down
Yeah.
because of the new state rules on that, but it does generate some revenue. Yeah, that's correct. But no other budget has grown like that, no, including the elementary school. Yeah,
Yeah, that's dead flat with 5 years ago now, basically, right? 2009, 4 years ago?
well, last year they were at 3.9. Numbers, I've been looking at far too many budgets the last 3 or 4 days, so I may be wrong, but
I just mean in terms of absolute dollars. This year was going to be the first year we had them back up over where they were in 2009.
that's correct. Yep. Yep. And DPW has been
Right.
going down substantially. Fire and police have just been really contractual, nothing more there. Town hall has gone down substantially over the years. I mean, we're what, 4 people, I believe? I think it's 4. 4 people lower in staff now than we were 5, 6 years ago. The whole town is a little leaner.
Road program.
Pardon?
We used to have a road program.
We used to have a road program.
Maybe they should offer webinars and give them to the school system then, huh? On how to manage staff. and things like that.
Well, yeah, we could do that. I mean, we've all become a lot leaner and meaner over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, the problem schools have, we all know it, is that 70 to 75% of their budget is staff. So it all hinges on their contracts. And that's,
And the realities of the outside
That's the
world
problem.
have not impinged upon those contracts to any significant
not at
extent.
KP, let's just put it that way. Yeah, I think the Norfolk schools have been far better at that. But King Philip has not.
90% of the police department budget is staff.
Pardon?
90% of the police department's budget is
Yep,
staff.
yep. And our guys took a 0.
Right.
I mean, police and fire both took 0s when we had that crisis that year. So, and and as did the town employees. I don't mean to exclude them. But our relationship with our unions has been very good, and they've been good partners. In our non-union, have been great partners. How many are there non-union now? Just you? But Arlie, you're 100% right. Your argument is right on the money, and I couldn't dispute it, but that's the dilemma we're in. We have to go left or right. I don't favor going in the middle because it doesn't solve anything. It's that truly is a Band-Aid, a wasted Band-Aid. So we either go to the 10 and hope someone joins us and do our very best to influence change, or we stay at the 6 and let the gloves drop where they may.
And still do our best to influence change.
Well, we're going to do that anyway, but
Right, but-
we'll have a lot more influence, I would think.
Yeah, that I think is
Yeah.
definitely a valid
Yeah.
point, that if we're leading the charge, I would think that they would listen a little more carefully.
I would hope so. Yeah.
Other questions, comments? No?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Oh, you're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank you for listening.
Grim though it is.
Well, I'm the eternal optimist.
That's no one way or the
We'll
other.
get through it.
Is there a way to get a copy of the current status of the budget? Appreciate that it's not, it's a work in progress. Is that maybe?
Of our budget?
Yeah.
I can give you my copy.
Well, I don't mean to. You'll probably be poring over this tonight before you go to bed. I don't want to
I have it
deprive you.
electronically. I have it electronically, I'm good.
But I don't want to, I mean.
Yeah, because, Mary, you can email. you can
That,
email
that,
us the
that
document.
copy, just so you know, no, you can have that, you can have it.
Okay, thanks.
That reflects a 10% for KP, and I believe we still in there have the elementary at 4.3.
So this would have a little bit,
So you
this
gotta-
draft would
So
have
it's
a
in-
larger
so it's
deficit than-
inflated,
yeah,
correct.
yeah.
You've got a pretty serious
And it
deficit.
also doesn't show, I may actually have some notations in there that you may see as you go along, but we reduced the fire budget by 15,000.
That's not true about Pat. Come on, that's terrible.
But what was it, what was that?
Took away
Your
my
notations?
1.5% raise.
Your notations.
Your
Carly's reading
notations, I
them.
was reading the notes you had about Pat here. That's really, he's not like that at all.
Can I have
Sorry.
that back?
Yeah, we can do a deal now.
Now you got me wondering if I did write some things down in there.
Why don't you take a look, make sure it's okay.
Let me just clean through that real quick. I think I'm okay. I don't know, sometimes you get a little emotional in these meetings. Like, why did he say that?
The tear stains are.
No, we're
are-
good. Here, it's all yours.
Okay.
We're good. You're off the hook, Pat. Or I'm off the hook. But there's 15,000 in the fire budget. There's 15,000 on the fire, and on the snow and ice. We've taken out the planner, we've taken out the police officer. Some of those things are not reflected in that budget. It does include the 150,000 from stabilization. It does include the 10% for KP, but it still has the elementary school at 4.3.
Was the 15,000 of the fire department the callback?
Yes.
Okay.
We had 70,000 in there. We've reduced it down to 55. The pilot shows them on track for about 44.7. So summertimes tend to be slow anyway. Everybody's gone, so we think 55, we talked with the chief about it. We think 55 is a good number. 70 was a little high.
Was there 200,000 of free cash already being used in the?
Yes. And our first run on.
Sorry, I was not here for the earlier discussion.
Our first run on where I think we're going to end up is we don't have any real concerns about taking care of the snow and ice.
That's amazing.
Yeah, wow.
Great.
So we think we're going to have enough surplus from this year's budget to take care of that.
That's good.
Snow and
that's
ice
good.
lottery pays off again.
Yeah, I know, we got 4 of the digits right this time. Well, the number's about $393,000, so it's been a tough winter.
275.
Not as bad as that 4-something we had a couple of years ago, but it's been a tough winter. But right now, our projections show us we can cover that.
Good.
So we're still about 200,000 short, once you get through with all the permutations. We'll be working on that this week, but we think we'll be okay. We'll have that worked out by the time we're together on the 24th.
If there's anything you can email to us in advance of that, I
Sure.
don't know, then that would be great. Something
Marion,
closer to
you,
the final product.
Be gracious enough to remind us of that? Thank you.
Okay.
It's great having her playing double duty here.
Right.
This is terrific. Okay, anything else?
Thanks
We're all
again.
set. Thank you again.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate all your work.
Appreciate yours as well.
Thanks.
No. There, we just lost our audience. They were here just to hear Jim in action. All right, we just have, I think,
One last thing.
Article 11 to deal with, unless anyone wants to continue that discussion at this point. No? I think we've had enough on that topic
Yeah,
tonight.
that's not a good
Okay.
topic.
Take me 2 weeks to recover.
Article 11 is an exact repeat of whatever its corresponding number was last fall.
Oh, that's right,
That-
yeah.
That change, the addition that they made at one point to restrict access has been removed.
Right.
So this is now precisely the same article as in the fall.
And there hasn't been any additional discussion on the plan for that, and it's just, put that back on, see what happens, maybe this time it'll get the votes that we need, and
Pretty much.
they had the access road on there, took it off, no real explanation from anybody who decided that was the way they should go, so
Great.
certainly not in agreement with putting this back on.
Anybody have any
Questions?
discussion that was to add to what we discussed in the fall? Everybody's
So in the
opinion still
fall,
the same?
we voted for it, right?
Not unanimously.
Not
Not unanimously,
Majority,
right?
It's
correct.
like a 5-2 vote,
Yeah.
I think?
Yeah.
Only 7 of us.
Folks
I
had
think,
concerns
5-2.
about extending the business district in this way without having more of it used already. I think.
And understanding really what would be used for, and then,
We're repeating how many from the fall? 11, 12, 13?
There are two, 11 and 12.
Sorry, yes, 11 and 12. Which of these makes more difference to the town? 11 or 12? Which is more important? I mean, if we're going to make an impassioned plea for the town to reverse itself, why don't we just choose one of them to make the impassioned plea for?
Well, we've already voted to approve 12.
So I guess that answers your question.
So, by your logic, you should
don't know.
vote against 11.
Well, I mean, Article 12 is more universal, whereas
Right,
11 is just
exactly.
one
It's-
plot.
I find that compelling.
Ever the salesman.
Yeah,
I guess I don't know. I think we were for 11 and 12 last time, and I don't know what's changed.
well, but is there merit to the idea of discouraging people from just playing lotto by just letting it ride again? In other words, if nothing has materially changed, then if the will of the town was that 11 not pass, then maybe,
That could be a little
Wasn't
strong
it-
in a
wasn't it
in a
more
fall meeting
of
to
a-
say the will of the town.
I don't
It's certainly
think-
less than 100 people.
Yeah.
I got the impression that people didn't understand what we were trying to do, more than it was that they didn't like what was on there. It was just they didn't get it.
I agree.
they couldn't figure out where even the lot was, but, yeah.
So
There was
unless
not
we're
a good
in- right,
presentation or
unless we're
plan
gonna
on what we really needed
change
to
that
advocate for.
presentation, then what's the point of even bringing them back?
Right.
Well, that will be up to the zoning bylaw study committee and the planning board if we approve it. I mean, I for one, was not too pleased with the way these articles were supported in
I
the
wasn't,
fall,
let's
and
just say, I
have
wasn't
no
impressed.
intention
Right.
Impressed by the
of
president.
carrying anybody's water this time.
Right.
But on the other hand, I'm perfectly willing to put them on the floor to let whoever, right?
Okay.
Let's say we've done 12, and I don't, personally, I haven't changed my opinion about Article 11, and I'm prepared to vote the same, so.
as am I move that we approve Article 11.
I second that.
Moved and seconded that we approve Article 11. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No,
Was that one no?
nay,
Two.
Two noes.
nay,
Okay, so it is.
no, nay.
1, 2, 3,
Nay, no.
5 to 2, is that right?
Why don't we say aye? Why the double negative? Sorry, that is the philosophical. There were 2 negative votes, as I believe, I recall.
Right,
So it sounds like it's more or less
Lisa,
the same.
right? Yeah, I would go
Yeah.
for that,
Had Angela been here, it would have been 3.
right.
Yeah, right.
5 to 3. so.
Sure.
Well, what's the-
Exactly.
What is our vote here? 5 to?
5 to 2.
5 2.
5 to 2, okay. You confused me with the 5 to 3.
He was trying to sneak it in.
The proxy.
The
By
proxy
proxy.
vote, yeah.
I know.
There's a question we ought to get answered, but I'm sure that it's.
Yeah, I
I mean, I can't imagine that they would allow somebody to relay a vote through another messenger who may or may not be reliable, for example. Oh, you mean you wanted me to vote no?
My bad, yeah. So that's the last remaining article, yes?
Yep.
That we can vote on.
We are done. We have,
Remind me, do I have both 11 and 12? Or do I
Yes.
have?
Good luck with that.
Okay.
list.
There's 11. But there's 12.
Harley gets 11. What, is that
Fun.
fate or is that fate?
Well, he assured us last time of his ability to
Yeah.
appropriately generate passion for the majority of the committee.
That's right.
so.
We'll see if he's as good as
I
his word.
thought I interpreted as punishment for not being at another.
I'll have my red pencil at the ready.
Oh, yeah, you weren't here for last.
The Steve
25,
Observer
26.
might.
So just as a general,
Okay.
as a not,
Angela had
I don't want to go
23,
back to that
24. I don't know if
discussion
she
with
knows
Jim,
that.
but I mean, I truly believe that schools, a school is the most important thing in a community. Without the schools, being great schools, then your town kind of falls apart. Everything else falls apart. It really follows where the schools are. But if we can't get Rentham to vote an operational override, what are we doing in a regional school system? And that's, I really feel that way. And I felt that way since my kids were in school.
That's an excellent point.
Unfortunately, the math on that is very bad. But
Let the voters
yeah,
decide.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rational question.
What do you mean by the math on that is bad?
Well,
It's expensive.
I've
Yeah.
thought, for example, of what if we were to buy Rentham out? Plainville has been very supportive of King Philip over the years. It's Rentham, and, I'm on television, so what the heck?
Your house will be kicking in the
It's historically fought any kind of increase.
They're very conservative in
Yes.
Rentham.
So, you think, okay, what's the cost to absorb their share of the operating budget? It's roughly a third. So you're talking about $10 million of operating cost, minus all those students, of course. So now we've got a plant that's too big for our student population, and we've got the cost for 2,000 students associated with 1,200, 1,400 students. So we'd be looking at a slice of the pie that goes from, in round numbers, $10 million to $15 million if we just left everything intact. At least that's the way I've analyzed it. It's probably not that simple, but you're talking millions.
But when you're saying the plant is too big, we're not talking about a fixed capital asset. This is mostly teachers who we would no longer need because the classes wouldn't be there.
We do have debt on the school,
Okay.
debt service, but you're right. I mean,
Do we own North, King Philip North? Do we own it outright?
King Philip does.
Well, because I appreciate what you're saying about the math, but I mean, compared to what? The math of Rentham appears to be null, the empty set always. I mean, that's never going to get any better.
and I'm not.
Right,
I'm
taking
just
aside.
saying,
I'm just throwing it out there, too.
You pursue the consequences and see where they go, and I've done that kind of thinking, actually, and rough through the numbers, and they look bad. Are they impossibly bad? Who knows?
I mean, it was because of the failure of the override to build the schools initially that pushed me to send my kids to private school. I just had it.
Yeah.
We sat through that and,
This is in Walpole or Rentham?
Here,
In Norfolk.
right here. And Rentham, it passed in Plainville, but not in Rentham, and it didn't go. So they didn't build a school. And we walked away. And I think Severian, the highest per capita population at Severian is from Norfolk. That tells you something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear that the correlation between the community's property values and their school system has been demonstrated everywhere 100% of the time. And, we've been fortunate, I guess, because of where we are. We seem to be in the path of expansion coming out from Medfield, so we haven't really felt much impact. But you got to believe over time it's going to hurt us.
Just a thought.
Who would initiate something like that? The selectmen?
Well, that's part of our problem, too, is we've got the 3 towns, none of which own the problem. We've got the school committee and the administration, which really are the equivalent of like our selectmen on a town level. And they're trying to juggle the needs and wants of the 3 towns, not, in my opinion, taking a very strong leadership position on these issues because, as I said earlier, anybody that's been looking at the budget for the last 5 years knows knew this had to come, whether it was this year, last year, or next year, okay, but it had to happen, and now it has. So it's a very frustrating situation, very frustrating.
Do they need a bigger finance team? I mean, is it just too much sounds like one person really is kind of driving the finances?
I mean, I don't know. Jim
Jim
is the guy who's looked into the numbers more carefully than anybody. So I don't really know that level of detail about it.
Right, how? It's overwhelming.
Well, it's
Say
not,
the least.
because other regional high schools do well. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. And the 3 towns we're talking about aren't exactly poverty-level towns. So, you know, the means are there, that's just the will to get it done has not been there up until now. At least that's my analysis of it.
And again, I don't even see an incentive to get it done properly. I mean, what's the real incentive? We have a vested interest with the children living in the same community. I mean, if those people aren't, living outside of the zone, then there's really not an interest other than a personal interest. And, obviously, everybody will make the claim that they have their best interest for the kids, but unless it has a direct impact to their families, then really they're just looking at the amount of money here. I mean, I guess that's the way we see it. It's kind of a crazy situation because we're funding this and we don't have control over it. To me, it doesn't make sense.
How long have we been a regional school? Back to late 50s, early 60s,
Yeah.
something
Really?
like that?
Early
So this
60s,
is a
very
very-
early 60s or very late 50s.
Yeah, I think it's 50-something.
And then they went to Walpole
So,
before that.
it's just, if we were to make the decision today, would we do something like this? I'm not so sure, but we're in it, and we've been in it for 50 years.
In other words, would we be a good reference to
Not-
another?
You'd have
Guess
to,
not.
No.
you'd have to build a charter
Not.
No.
that would make sense. I think you could do it if you had a charter that made sense, but the way it's set up, where one town can block and override, that's just,
Surely.
That's ridiculous.
Is there a
think
structural
most-
way to make changes to the terms?
I'm guessing that much of that is dictated by the state, but again, I don't know enough to know for sure. So, in any event. Bad situation all around. I don't think we have any further business tonight, not that I'm aware of anyway. We meet again in 2 weeks, a joint meeting with the selectmen, at which point we will hopefully have a budget to vote. That puts us very tight on our timetable, so please get we still want the summaries of the articles. We voted everything except the budget, so get those in by the 19th still as originally committed. Our plan is to have everything written, ready to go, so that when we vote on the 24th, on the 25th, we get stuff off to the printer.
Okay.
Excuse me, I wasn't here for the last meeting. Was I assigned something?
I'm sure we gave you a few little goodies. yeah.
1 through 20.
I'm not taking over your position, am I?
Gave you the budget.
I think we voted yes for both of those.
Al, you have,
26.
I'm sorry?
25 and 20.
We didn't give you a
25,
lot.
26. Oh, that's what you said a
That's
moment
what
ago?
I'm saying.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
That's
thought
what I
you,
was telling you.
And we voted
Oh,
yes.
I didn't understand that.
Yes.
Thank you. That's what I did. Thank you.
So I move that we adjourn?
Been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Al, were you thinking she was saying?
Your point about 26.